Hello, my name is Jessica Manchester, and this is the lesson study format. So, what is the lesson study format? So, just like students, teachers learn by interacting with their peers and are active agents in constructing knowledge. So, that is kind of the foundation for which this was built upon. It is a long-term professional development where teachers collaboratively plan, research, and study a certain lesson. So, this can be a specific standard that you are supposed to teach. It could be a certain technique, such as differentiating, or it could be a challenging lesson. I remember how difficult long division was with my students, or it could be something like main idea in detail, something like that. So to determine how students learn best, that is what I really want to emphasize with this. It's focusing on students' learning rather than teacher behaviors. So these teachers go into other classrooms and observe other teachers teach, but we're really not critiquing what the teacher is doing. We're really paying attention to the students. So it emphasizes what kinds of instructional activities support student learning and their thinking. So you're really trying to view a lesson from the lens of a student. So the teachers in the room, as they are observing a lesson, will analyze student thinking and misconceptions. They will work to anticipate student outcomes. They may reflect on data of the student work. And they really determine how students approached problems and where they might be confused. So here are the steps in a lesson study. The first one is you study. You study the curriculum and standards, and you consider long-term goals for student learning, and you really consider what are the things that they struggle with that we need to work on. So you work with a team to then make a plan. You might do some research. You anticipate student thinking, student misconceptions, student difficulties, and then you will then plan data collection and the lesson. Typically, these are in teams of, they recommended 4 to 6 people. The example I read about was upwards of 10. So whatever is helpful as long as people are kind of on the same page working toward a common goal. You will do the research lesson. So one of the team member teaches, and while that teacher is teaching the lesson, the other teachers are in the room observing students collecting data. Then you will meet to reflect. You'll share data, what was learned about student learning, what are implications for this unit and more broadly, and then what learnings and new questions do we want to carry forward in our work. And typically you might teach the lesson to another class another time to try to implement those reflections, and then you could do that a few times if you have enough teachers on the team. So here is on the left the research plan that they recommend. It looks much like a lesson plan that we would write, but it has a few expected or a few different things, such as anticipated student responses and really trying to emphasize what do we want to look for during the lesson. So this is a year-long plan for implementing this lesson study. I thought using an example, it was the most helpful to me understanding this format, so I am sharing an example. This team wanted to investigate differentiated instruction. So if you want to pause the video and just look through their year-long plan, they really were focusing on studying differentiated instruction, but they did this through a lesson of main idea and details. So they were able to plan this whole year. I believe they did the lesson study 2 or 3 times specifically, but they were constantly reflecting and talking and discussing, and they used it as a way to discover how they could better do differentiated instruction in the classroom. So as you can see, it's not just for perfecting one lesson. It's really to bring focus to our practice and to build habits and goals and ideas that can be utilized in all aspects of our teaching. So some challenges, you really would need to have administrative support. You'd need a lot of time to meet. They suggest it replacing a weekly staff meeting, perhaps at least once a month. So it would need to replace some things that we already have because it takes out of classroom time. It really takes a lot of time to collaborate and plan. And if you have a challenging team, perhaps with not the same goals, this could take longer, which could be a challenge. And then to actually do the lesson studies, the one teacher teaches and all of the other teachers observe them. So all of those teachers leave their own classroom, which requires substitutes to fill their place. This presents a lot of problems that I won't share because we're all educators and we know those inconveniences. Some of the benefits is that it brings in other eyes to see what your students are doing during a lesson. So I know this sounded exciting to me because people aren't coming in to watch me teach, but they're watching what my students are doing. So there might be things that my students are doing that I completely miss. And so having all those other eyes is really helpful. It also allows long-term collaboration to determine how students are thinking. So if your peers help you determine how a student is teaching, it might help you get into the head of that student in all subjects, not just in that lesson. It also transforms teachers' thinking. It really kind of sets you up for that inquiry mindset to ask questions and to investigate, which is, of course, a good habit to have. It also builds habits that will broadly improve your practice, like I said, not just on that lesson. So in summary, it does require a lot of time, planning, and collaboration. The article I read, they did a lesson study 2 or 3 times a year. You'd really want to do it at least once or twice. I'd say at least twice so that you can get a feel for it. Doing it for a year, like a year in between each one, might be a little challenging. But so you'd want to do it relatively frequently, but a lot goes into doing it. I do think you would need a really good team to be able to implement this. You'd really have to be on the same page. You'd have to have not necessarily similar styles, but similar values and beliefs in the classroom, which can sometimes be a challenge. And then last, I think to implement this in any school, I think it would be beneficial to have at least one experienced and knowledgeable teacher about lesson study specifically. So they shared in the articles, novice teachers and veteran teachers really need help. It's not just teaching. It's a specific lesson study format. It's its own thing. So it's not just an experienced teacher, but it would really be beneficial to have somebody who has experience in the lesson study format itself. So I think that would be something that would be really helpful to have. It would be really hard to implement this if you're working with all novice teachers. I think someone needs to be confident and competent to lead a group of these lesson study participants, even if they have 30 years of experience. This specific format is quite different, so you would need an expert, I think. These are the 3 references, and that is it. Thank you for watching.